There we go. Hi, everybody. I can see the recording button, so that's good. My name is Nick, and I'm the Programme Manager at the National Literacy Trust for the Young Readers Programme. The Young Readers Programme is our Reading for Enjoyment and Book Choice programme at the National Literacy Trust, which allows children to take home books of their choice at fun reading events. And I'm going to start with my short session today by talking through some of the research we have at the National Literacy Trust around reading for enjoyment. So this first slide here, well, all this research actually, it's taken from our annual literacy survey 2023, which basically gives us a yearly snapshot of children and young people's reading attitudes. And essentially what we are seeing is an increasing downward trend in reading for enjoyment in the UK. So we can see this first statistic here, 2 in 5 children and young people aged 8 to 18 said that they enjoyed reading in their free time in 2023. And that's actually the lowest result we've ever had since we first started asking that question when we first started doing this in 2005. So it is concerning stuff. We've also got 3 in 10 children. Well, it looks like something's gone slightly odd with the slide, but you can still see there 3 in 10 children and young people aged 8 to 18 said they read daily in 2023. Again, it's the same as last year, but part of a downward trend. And 1 in 2 children and young people aged 8 to 18 told us that they've been encouraged to read by their parents and carers, which of course, but looking at the other way around means 1 in 2 children and young people aren't encouraged by their parents and carers in this way. I guess the other thing to note with this is that as a general rule, for those eligible for free school meals, these statistics are worse as well. I'll take you on to another slide now and share with you a little bit more research. We can see here motivations for reading, and I've put this up there because, you know, what we see, this downward trend, what it means is that children are missing out on all the benefits that reading for enjoyment can bring, essentially. And what a better way to show those benefits than by showing you the reasons that children give, the motivations that children give for reading. And you can see here it's everything from learning about new things, understanding the views of others, lots in terms of well-being, reading helping me relax, and also reading helping me feel connected to the world as well. And I'm sure, you know, I'm preaching to the converted here. I know that all of you know about the various benefits of reading for enjoyment. We can see some of those there. And of course, I guess the other ones are also the longer term benefits. So in terms of job prospects and finances and all sorts of things like that in the future. I'd like to move on and talk to you about reading environment as well. Again, this comes from that annual literacy survey that we do every year with about 70,000 children and young people. And we can see that reading environment is key. So it's absolutely key. And this is talking about reading environment in the home, which I know that you know, teachers have got less influence over, but I think it indicates towards also the importance of the environment when it comes to reading in the classroom as well. So we can see nearly 3 times as many children and young people who perceive their reading environment to be supportive said that they enjoyed reading. I also wanted to talk to you about what would make children read more on the next slide here, because I think it gives an indication to some of the things we do, and I'm going to talk through these now, some of the things that we can do to help children to enjoy reading, to create that positive reading environment. So let's talk about some of these now, and I'm going to talk about book events first of all, and all of these ideas that I'm talking about, all of them come from the Young Readers Programme, the programme that I manage, and speaking to lots and lots of teachers across the country as we deliver this programme. So if we move on to the book event slide, we can see that, well, creating memorable, fun experiences for children and young people, that's what we've learned has real impact when it comes to reading for enjoyment. And that sort of pie chart I've got there, what I'm showing there really is the different elements that I think make up a really great reading events. That's games and creative activities, story time, book choice and reading, and book talk. So these things together, these things I think make up a really fantastic event. But what we're trying to do is find something that's really memorable and it connects reading with fun and enjoyment, makes it feel special. So some of the sort of relatively, I suppose, simple events, although I acknowledge that everything takes time and so on, so there's no simple answers here. But some of the sort of events that teachers do include bookniks, so that's picnics combined with books, essentially. Sleepover style events where children might come with their teddy or in their pajamas and have a scary story read to them. Sometimes reading in unusual places, reading dens, anything that makes reading feel a bit special. And you can also incorporate reading into other parts of the school calendar as well. So for example, sometimes the schools we work with might incorporate reading and a reading event into something like school sports day. I guess the other thing to say about this in terms of events is anything that you do, again, that can make events feel fun, books feel fun, sorry. So that could mean like book hauls or book reveals, so revealing a big collection of books, hunting across the school to find books, book tokens or visits from the book fairies. These are all things that schools have done. And on the previous slide, there are a couple of links that you can see with some ideas for making reading fun, essentially. Next thing I wanted to talk about, again, this is key to our Young Readers program, is choice. Absolutely key, because it empowers children and young people. It creates that self-motivation, which is vital for reading for enjoyment. So we believe when it comes to reading, it's about a wide view of what it is that children should or children can read. So that could include really high quality, award-winning fiction, but it could also be joke books and cookery books. It could be that they've just got one child's just got a pet hamster and they want to learn how to look after that hamster. Comics, wordless books, whatever it is, anything that they're really excited about. Children really want an atlas. That's fantastic. Let's get them excited about reading that. So, really, one thing I really encourage when we speak to teachers as part of this program is to remain open-minded when children are choosing books. So avoiding those phrases like you've already read that or not that one. I guess the other thing to say is that I realize that choice can be dependent on the range of books that you have in your school library as well. So in terms of class reads, doing things like allowing children to vote on the class read can be really impactful, or even having children champion specific books too. And again, I'm sure you're aware of this, but considering diversity and inclusion is really, really important. So making sure there's a real diverse range of books, because what we find is that children respond really positively to reading books where the characters have similar backgrounds to them. I also wanted to talk about structured choice when it comes to reading, because we want to make sure children feel supported when they're choosing books too, especially if they're not in the habit of choosing books that often. So there's various book choice strategies that you can use to help children choose books, and it's worth talking through them. And I've got a few examples of that on the screen here. And it's also helpful to get to know your children. So using things like surveys or request jars, or giving children relatively limited books to choose from at first, or even sort of pitching books to the children to help them with that choice, from a relatively limited choice at first and then extending that out. We also think the book talk is really key. That's another important part of our program. And on the next slide, I've got a few examples of some of the things I particularly like in terms of structures when it comes to book talk. But I think key is it not being about testing. I think especially, obviously there's a place for that, but when it comes for reading for enjoyment. So talking, not testing. So using phrases like "tell me" or "I wonder" can work really well there, as well as sharing your own thoughts. So it doesn't feel like an interrogation of knowledge, essentially. I think this the trust model from the EEF is also really useful as well. If we move on, the other thing I wanted to highlight is the importance of role models, reading role models when it comes to reading. So as a teacher, you're a reading model, you are superheroes, and the children, the pupils, they look up to you. So if you're able to be discovered reading, that's fantastic. You know, do try to talk to pupils about your favorite books, and you know, why not ask pupils for recommendations as well? I think especially some teachers who might feel, you know, actually their knowledge when it comes to children's books isn't their strong point. Actually asking pupils for recommendations and then working their way through a child's or children's list, I think, can be a really lovely thing. Okay, finally, I just wanted to highlight book ownership. So look, I know that you know it's not easy to be able to facilitate children actually owning their own books, but we know what impact that can have if that is something that's possible, and is a key part of our program, which is why I bring it up. And you know, there's lots of research. So for example, National Literacy Trust research shows that 1 in 5 children aged 5 to 8 do not own their own book at home. So that is everything from me, really. I guess just to summarize, in terms of the elements of the Young Readers Programme, I think can have real impact in terms of reading for enjoyment. It's those fun reading events. Choice is really key. Talking about books in an informal way, trying to be a reading role model, and where you can, enabling people to choose and own their own books are the things that I would highlight for a positive reading environment. And that's everything from me. And thank you so much for letting me speak today.
Thank you, Nick. I think Book Nick is my takeaway from that. I've never heard of that in all my life, and I thought, oh, that's a good one to steal. I'm going to pass in that on to my wife when she comes home from school. Now, Tom, let me just set up your slideshow, and then it's all up to you, sir.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Matthew. Thank you. Well, it's good to know that I'm very much on the same page as Nick in terms of what I'll be advocating, and hopefully give you some ideas as well on what that looks like practically. Things that we do at St Modwyn's here, but things that I've done in the past as well that hopefully will give you some practical on the ground ideas for what you can have a go at. To encourage that reading for pleasure, I think it's so important. If we're creating a reading culture in our schools, it's really important that all our children feel a part of it. And I think I definitely echo what Nick says there. So I've kind of come up with an ABC model, hopefully to be a little bit memorable tonight to help you with those things. So here's my ABC for reading for pleasure. Access to reading opportunities, being amongst readers, and comfortable experiences. So I'll start with access to reading opportunities. I think we've got to get great quality texts in front of our students, not just books, but they can be newspapers, comic books, poetry. We want such a range of reading opportunities so that they can discover who they are as a learner. My favorite, one of my favorite memories that kind of epitomized what reading for pleasure for me is in the classroom is when we had a book carpet in my classroom. We cleared the tables away. We had a spare half an hour. If you ever get a spare half an hour nowadays, we had a spare half an hour. We pushed the tables to the side, and we basically just got all of the reading material we had in my classroom out on the floor, and the children were able to have that opportunity to look through fiction, non-fiction, poetry, picture books, fact files, comics, all of those different ones, graphic novels. There was just as Nick said, a diverse level of representation in there. There was different colour and age and gender and religion all represented within those books, so the children were given that freedom really to flick through and decide what they wanted to. And I think it's important. Those reading opportunities shouldn't be obligatory. You shouldn't be insisting that a child chooses a book and sticks with that book. If you're a reader like me, then you flip between books here, there, and everywhere, and you might put one down after the first chapter because you don't fancy it. So we don't want to kind of set a different standard for our students. And I just remember seeing a boy who kind of had spotted a joke book that day, and he was sat there, and he came to me and he said, what do you call a cow with no legs? Ground beef. And he had the classroom in absolute stitches, and he was having a great time. There was a lad in my class who had found a book from the Little People Big Dreams series, all about Josephine Baker, the African-American dancer. And I just let him sit there and take this book in, and then we got an iPad out and he watched her dance. And he was just mesmerized by what he saw. There were so many opportunities within that class to see children engaging with reading in a way that we don't see in lessons. And it's really important, isn't it, that our children are able to read by the time they leave us at primary. We want them to be able to have that opportunity to be academic readers. But one of the things that we've reflected on quite a few times at St Modwyn's, and it might be something that you might find helpful to do in your schools, is to consider how often in a day our children are reading academically in comparison with how they're reading for pleasure. That's not by any means to say that we should be trying to make that equal. We have a job to do as teachers to teach our children. We can't just be reading for pleasure. But it was quite eye-opening when we did that, to see just how little time was put into our put in for those sort of opportunities. So we talk about carving out sacred time for reading, finding that time on a timetable that's not going to be pushed around. It's ring-fenced for that opportunity for children to get alongside and read. Another thing that we do with reading opportunities is a secret book club. It's great. Children love it. You hide golden tickets in the library. If they find a golden ticket, they get to come along to the secret book club the next week. They don't know what the book will be. They just know they turn up. It'll be a cracking book, and they'll get biscuits as well, and they'll get a chance to have an activity. It's not going to be academic in any way. No writing, just that chance for them to love a book. And biscuits are always a winner as well, aren't they? And then there's being amongst readers. And I think, Nick, again, you touched on this a little bit. I think we've got to be seen reading as teachers. It's not enough for teachers to be teachers. We've got to be readers as well. I remember a guy called Cairo Adams on Twitter, who's really worth following for this sort of stuff. He posts some fantastic stuff about diverse reading opportunities. He said he just started taking a book out on his break duty, and he would be reading just as he was out in the corridor, or he'd be reading for the first 5 or 10 minutes just before, as the children went in with the register. And just the intrigue that children have, just to see their teacher reading, see what they're reading, they want to find out, they want to be nosy. It's a great idea. Also, reading assemblies. What a greater way to promote this idea that we can all read for pleasure by doing it together, picking great quality books. We've done it in different ways. So we've had picture books that we've done just a one-off assembly on, and we've shared it as a whole school. They love that. But similarly, we've worked our way through chunkier novels together as a whole school. You obviously have to pitch that appropriately for what you think is going to work for your children. But those reading assemblies have brought this sort of culture together of readers. And suddenly when you start to see that actually it's not just you in a classroom who's being forced to read for your reading lesson, actually people like this and they're interested, and we've got something to discuss. I think promoting that opportunity for discussion is also vital. And then also in terms of being amongst readers, not just being confined by our school walls. So thinking about, social media, it gets its negative press, but there are positives, and there are so many amazing authors on social media who engage in such a meaningful way with their readership. Get them involved, tweet their author. I know that was a game changer in my class. I remember just before lockdown, it was days before we went into lockdown, and I tweeted on Charlie Ralph, who is the author of The Boy in the Back of the Class, because a boy in my class at the time had just read it and had fallen in love with the book. She tweeted me back. I told her all about it, and they went into a little bit of a conversation through this Twitter thread. And then in the end, Anjali was incredibly generous and sent a series of books to a Waterstones near where we live for him to go and pick up. And it was just before lockdown, and it was amazing, such a lovely opportunity. to have that connection, which we haven't had before social media, that direct connection between author and reader. And then also in terms of comfortable experiences, we want reading for pleasure to be something that is enjoyable. Books should be high quality, of course, and we should be wanting our children to read lots of different things. But really, I think in terms of comfortable experiences, we can look at that in two different ways. Is it comfortable in the classroom, physically? Can they sit down on the floor? Will that stop them from reading? Can they sit on a sofa, or can they read outside for the afternoon? But also, are our children going to be comfortable if they're reading books that they can't access independently? And how can we make that a more comfortable experience? Can we buddy them up with partners? Can we read a little bit in a small group with the teacher as the expert reader leading the way? And so I think with those comfortable experiences, it's about making sure that our students really feel that they can have that pleasurable experience from the book. Margaret Atwood said, the author, said, I read for pleasure, and that's the moment that I learn the most. And I think sometimes we put all our eggs in one academic basket, and we forget that actually, when you're lost in a book, it's so magical. You might be reading for work, and you're probably going to take a lot less away from the book that you're absolutely reading at home on the sofa. So I think that's really important. I wanted to highlight a little bit of research myself as well, that's been recently carried out, which is the Far Shore Story Trial, which I think I've got on the next slide there. And on the Far Shore, it was 20 primary schools in spring earlier this year that just added 20 minutes of story time to their day. And you can see the findings that I've listed there. Benefits that I think we all want for our children. We want our children to want to read. The interesting thing being that just by being read to, they made progress with their own understanding of reading it themselves. And then both from a child and staff wellbeing point of view, there were benefits just from carving that sacred time out. And I think that's a really, if I could kind of push for one thing, I think it's really important that we have that sacred time every day where we can just enjoy books together. The Far Shore Storytime Trial, the link's there, and I'm sure Matthew will send it out, but it says there that that's still not commonplace in all schools. And it's one of the most powerful quick fixes that we can make, to find that 10 minutes at the end of the day to share a book. But then there was also a little bit that I wanted to talk about in terms of the other benefits of reading for pleasure as well. Stories are just this awesome opportunity for us to become more aware of who we are and more aware of what's going on inside our brains. It's a chance for us to reflect. And at the start, it was mentioned about the book that me and my brother wrote called Bottles. We wrote it because we realized that there's a real power in books. If we just go on to the next slide, you'll see that there's some real power in the way that books are written and what they hold. If you look at the quote there about bibliotherapy, the idea that when we interact with the book, we're actually starting to reflect on ourselves and how we react to one another. And what we found is that it's really powerful to build a safe distance for the child to reflect on their own experiences. I think of an example, there's a book called On Sudden Hill, which is by Linda Sarah and Benji Davis. It's one of my favorite books. It's a beautiful sort of rhyming picture book, and it's all about friendship. It's about jealousy when a third friend comes into a partnership of two. And suddenly we had this opportunity. This was going on left, right, and centre in my class. Friendships falling out all the time because someone else wanted to get involved. And when we try to deal with those directly, sometimes children can take a step back, and that can be quite difficult. But when we have something like a book that we've read for pleasure together, that we're looking for a lesson from together, suddenly we have a safe distance to be able to say, well, if that happens to you, how might you react? Who would you be like in the story? And those questions, they're a different lens. They're a different lens through to the academic that we would normally go through, I think. What they do is on the next slide, I think I've got it there, that they provide mirrors for us to see ourselves in the stories that we look at, but they also offer windows for the opportunity for us to look into the lives of others. And I guess that touches on the point that Nick made about the fact that we need to offer those diverse reading opportunities. Yeah, the name of the book that I was just talking about was On Sudden Hill by Linda Sarah and Benji Davis. I think when we're talking about reading for pleasure, we want those opportunities all the time for all our students, constantly looking for those chances to engage them with reading. We want them to be amongst readers. They should be able to see readers all around them. And another thing that we've done, which is quite a simple setup, is we've just opened up our library on a Friday afternoon for parents to come in after school if they want to, and they can just sit there and read, and they can have a bit of a time. And the final sort of slide there from the empathy lab, the most important findings I found from the empathy lab were that empathy is a learnable skill. And so when we trust our children to read for pleasure and we give them that opportunity, there's something almost more powerful than just the reading itself taking place. There's the opportunity for them to discover who they are and to discover how they're going to navigate the world. So I think that's probably my time as well. But just a reminder of that ABC, give them access to reading opportunities whenever you can. Be amongst the readers, so get them involved, and make sure that teachers are seen as readers in your school. And then there's comfortable experiences. Is it going to be comfy for them in the classroom? But also, what are they reading and how do we make it a comfortable, enjoyable experience for them?
Thank you very much, Tom. I'm just trying to close that at the same time and open the next one. One thing that strikes me, we've been having these conversations in work for a while now, is we're thinking about back to our own primary childhood. And the best time was carpet time. Spindleback chair, teacher, always on a cushion, sat reading whatever book it was. And that seems to be disappearing rapidly out of schools at the moment. And it's a travesty, absolute travesty. Katie, Emma.
I was just going to ask if anyone remembers specifically that experience and hearing the book Plop, the Owl Who Was Afraid of the Dark. That's my really strong memory from starting school. And you all sat down and you listened to that story. Yeah, I don't know if like every class at that time of my generation had to have that book, but yeah, that's my first memory of school. It's such a good book, isn't it, Rebecca?
I think I'm a bit small. One thing I remember was BFG. Sorry, Rebecca. Rebecca.
Oh, sorry. No, I was going to let you carry on with your BFG memory. No, I totally remember that book. And my daughter brought it home from her primary school recently, and I couldn't believe this childhood memory that just came back. So hearing it again mentioned, that's absolutely fabulous.
Yeah, it stuck with me.
Katie, Emma, all over to you.
The Hobbit. Oh, I've actually never read The Hobbit. Okay, yes. Katie and I are going now. I think I'm gonna start. So do you introduce us, Matt, or do I read this bit and sort of introduce ourselves?
Well, I think I was introducing you. You might not have heard me at the beginning.
Oh, I just mean the little sentence. Do I read, you know, the blurb?
I think people can read. Okay,
perfect. Okay, so just digest that blurb. Just take it in, and we'll go on to the next slide. So I'm Emma Fitzgerald. I'm a product owner for Originals and Book Club for EYFS and Key Stage 1, and I'm here with...
Hello, I'm Katie Sinnott, and I'm the product owner for Key Stage 2 for Twinkl Originals and Book Club.
We are both qualified teachers with experience from EYFS to Upper Key Stage 2, and so are our writers and editors that help us make the books. We work with a team of writers, editors, designers, and illustrators who are all passionate about children's literature. We make Twinkl Originals books for children aged 0 to 11 at the moment, who knows beyond that. And today we'll be summarizing some parts of the reading framework and hopefully giving you some practical ideas you feel like you can use in your setting. We've got a more detailed look at the reading framework for both EYFS teachers and Key Stage 1 teachers, and then separately a Key Stage 2 blog that does the same thing, that has a little bit more from the reading framework and a little bit more detail that I think we'll be sharing afterwards. So this will be sort of a brief overview of those things. But if you did want any more information for your CPD or to share with anyone who's not here, do have a look at those as well. They're on our blog. So this is a little diagram that I really like from the reading framework, because I think it really shows you just how important our picture books and novels are alongside phonics, decoding, word reading. Both are essential. We need the word reading, but we need the language comprehension to be a good reader. The reading framework is really clear about that, that you need both. Scholastic found in their reading audit that teachers are generally more confident describing what good phonics teaching looks like, and they're less confident when identifying good comprehension teaching. But your needers read both, and so our focus today is how you can provide both in your classroom. So just opening up to the comments there, just to see how true that is, or how much our audience sort of feels like that resonates with them. What do you find easier to teach? Do you find it easier to teach word reading or decoding using your systematic synthetic phonics program, always a mouthful, or are you more confident teaching language comprehension and the understanding of what's being read? Feel free to just put your comments in the comment section there, and we'll keep an eye on them and maybe reflect a little bit at the end in the discussion. I can see a lot of people already saying SSP, phonics, language. Okay, maybe the focus moves a little bit to language for the Key Stage 2 teachers. Word reading does have more clear progression. I agree with that. Let's keep them coming and maybe move on, and yeah, keep them coming as we continue. So I've actually worked on the wonderful phonics program that we have, Twinkl Phonics, and I've worked on the decodable readers. I've written some of our best-selling decodable books like Patter Pig. I don't know how many of you have seen that. So I love both, but I also am really passionate about Twinkl Originals and wanting all three of those things to be seen as essential, and that together they make up the whole reading package. Word reading and language comprehension require different sorts of teaching. Obviously, they require different resources and different books. So definitely go and have a look at phonics, Twinkl Phonics. Go and have a look at Rhino Readers. They are fantastic. But today I'm going to be talking about Twinkl Originals a little bit more than those. So the value of our books, really our products that we offer, but of all picture books, not just Twinkl Originals, I'm talking generally about books, when you're reading aloud, is the comprehension, teaching comprehension through books. Comprehension refers to the way in which readers make sense of the words they read or hear. And to develop children's understanding of language, you can use speaking and listening with your youngest learners, the earliest skills you're going to be teaching them. You can develop it through reading books aloud to them, and also discussing what has been read with these younger children, but also with the older children that you're teaching. Start reading to children from a very young age, you know, the age where it doesn't seem like they know what you're talking about. Start then. And you can try reading our Originals First Words books with your youngest learners. And we've got a little snapshot there of our beautiful Let's Explore the Jungle book. They're very short, they've got beautiful, bright, vibrant pictures and limited words, just to help children with that earliest vocabulary acquisition. And keep reading aloud, not just with babies, but those children that can decode. Keep going, keep reading aloud to them. Next slide. Reading aloud is, just evidence shows, one of the best ways to increase the number of words that children hear and learn. It is one of the best routes for helping them to acquire that vocabulary. I love this table here, which is from the reading framework, that shows by the time they are 5 years old, the number of words children know differs greatly between those who are read to lots and those who are not. And you can see if children are never read to, they know, as a general rule, under 5,000 words. But if they're read to 5 books a day, they can know as many as, look at, nearly 1.5 million words. And that's, you know, before they even start school. So that disparity between children and where they are with their reading starts before they even get in your classroom most of the time. And I think another thing that I just want to get across that maybe is often overlooked, that using picture books and hearing stories and reading to children supports decoding. It's not instead of, they're not in competition, they're not separate, they're things that work together. When children start to read for themselves, the words that they can decode are too limited to broaden their vocabulary. So they continue to benefit from hearing books read to them. Through listening, they gain that collection of words so that they can later recognize them when reading more complex text for themselves. Decoding a word that you have heard before and that you understand is far more useful and satisfying than decoding a word that you don't know. Reading aloud, I think, is one of the best ways to create those enthusiastic readers. Decoding can be exhausting work. Anyone that teaches phonics with those young learners at the start of that journey, and those children that continue to struggle with decoding as they progress through school, knows that it's hard work, we know that it wears children out. Listening to a fluent reader makes the rewards of learning to read really obvious to children. They know it's hard work, but they can see the prize almost of what's awaiting them when they master that skill. Through listening, children discover that books hold information, adventure, humor, surprises, joy, and drama. And I put here one of our most popular books for very young children of 2 to 4 called Harold's Worst Nightmare. And I think that's a really good example of, it's a really simple text, but the way that the adult reads to the child really brings it to life and shows them how much drama, how much excitement, how much anticipation can be in, just can be held within a book. And then children from listening to those are motivated to unlock this excitement for themselves by learning to read. And now I think I'm handing over to the lovely Katie Sinnott.
Thank you very much, Emma. Yeah, Harold's Worst Nightmare is definitely my little boy's firm favourite at the moment. So kudos to me, obviously, for bringing in that enthusiasm and bringing the drama with that one. Yeah, so I just wanted to start similarly to how Emma did, just in the chat. If you don't mind, if you're a Key Stage 2 teacher or you've recently taught in Key Stage 2, it would just be really interesting to get an idea of how often you are currently reading aloud to your Key Stage 2 class. Because I think, as a general rule, it's very accepted that within an EYFS and Key Stage 1 setting, that there's lots of opportunity to read aloud to your class, but potentially less so in the Key Stage 2 classroom. It's really lovely to see comments coming in already saying every day, multiple times a week. That's great to see. Brilliant. Okay, so maybe we can discuss more at the end and take a deeper dive into some of those answers, but keep them coming in. Thank you very much. So it was great to listen to Tom talking about in his school setting how they have that regular story time, and it was also great to hear about that the Foreshore trial, and to see the impact of having that daily story time in classrooms. And we're going to be taking a look really at what the reading framework is saying about creating this reading culture within your classroom. And it is fantastic to see that they are very, very clearly saying that you should definitely, even within a Key Stage 2 classroom, be making opportunities 4 times a week for 20 minutes to have that story time with your Key Stage 2 class. And I appreciate that timetables are really, really pressured, but it's about safeguarding that time. And I think some of those stats that Tom shared, and also some of the findings that we'll go into from the reading framework, really evidence why it's so important to safeguard that time and to make sure that it's planned into the timetable and that we're not kind of using it and utilizing it for other purposes. So as it says in the reading framework, so through listening to stories being read aloud, Key Stage 2 children hear and understand new vocabulary that they can later reuse in their own speech and their own writing. They can hear what fluency sounds like and what expression sounds like from you as the expert reader. They're motivated to explore increasingly complex texts because you're choosing for them a story that you know will infuse them. You know that they can aim for perhaps at their own level eventually once they're able to decode that for themselves, and they're able to witness that excitement and pleasure that there is to be gained from reading a whole different type of range of books. So really, and if that isn't in your timetable already, would definitely have a chat with SLT and see where you can timetable that in. We'd really highly recommend fitting that in around transitions for a bit of decompression time, so whether that's before lunch or at the end of the day, but whatever works for your setting. But yeah, there's definitely really explicitly within the reading framework that idea that needs to be in there. And this is just taking a little look then at how that reading aloud with your Key Stage 2 classroom is really supporting all readers. So the idea here is that it's focusing, it's focused really on levelling the playing field and inviting all children to the conversation. So for children who may not be so strong with their word reading, they're hearing those higher level texts, and it's allowing them to access those big ideas and that higher level language. So the reading framework here just says that it exposes children to challenging vocabulary, again, whether it's within their current decoding level or not. It provides them with opportunities to discuss the plot and the language, which might be above the level that they're able to access within decodable books. It allows the teacher to explain concepts that children might not have first-hand experience of or might not come across again within books that they're able to decode themselves. And it ensures that people of all reading levels can access the same text and contribute to that discussion with their peers. And I think for me, that's really a solid point there, is that it's leveling the playing field. It's inviting all children to that conversation, and regardless of what they're able to decode for themselves, they might have some great ideas. They might be able to contribute in other ways, whether that's about character development or it's about prediction, whatever it might be. It means that everybody can access that same conversation. So that's within your story time sessions, but of course we need to develop that reading culture, we need to be reading all across the curriculum. So here we're just going to be taking a look at within reading lessons and within your English lessons. So the emphasis here is on reading a feast of books, so finding great texts that work for your topic or your theme or within your English teaching, and running with that for your English lessons, your SPAG sessions, your reading sessions, and your story time. And what that will allow you to do is to cover lots and lots of different books and text types within a half term, rather than just delving into one in lots and lots of detail. So you're exposing children to a whole range of texts, whether that's your long class novels, whether that's picking up a poem as a one-off, whether that's reading some picture books that are suitable for Key Stage 2. So they're really having that wealth and that exposure of different text types. So you're really grabbing all children's attention and giving everybody that opportunity to find something that they're really, really invested in. And it's really interesting within the guided reading framework to see that there is that focus towards whole class reading sessions, as opposed to what we might view as more traditional guided reading sessions. So if that isn't something that's happening in your setting at the moment, do take a look at the blog that Emma mentioned earlier. Have a chat with SLT, and maybe this is something that within your setting you want to make that shift towards. Again, I think it was Tom that mentioned that idea of, maybe Nick perhaps mentioned that idea of book talk. And again, I think using those reading sessions to have those whole class discussions rather than your sort of traditional segregated tables focusing on different texts. Again, it's just leveling that playing field, and it's giving children really the opportunity to access text at a level that means that it's pushing them and it's giving them that access to the new vocabulary, the new ideas. I think our slides are in a slightly different order. Would you mind just skipping to the one that says reading with expression and fluency for me, if that's okay? Thank you very much. So Emma's kind of covered this already, but really, and actually Tom has mentioned this also, but it's really the idea of you being that role model of the reader. So there's lots of mention within the new framework about how you have that key role in making sure that you're showing that enthusiasm for the text, you're reading it with expression, you're really exaggerating the punctuation, you're using the correct tone to convey the different emotions of the readers. So really you have that key job of modelling to the children, again, as Emma's mentioned, the reward that awaits them once they've become fluent and confident readers, what they can expect their reading experience to look like if they continue with their decoding work. So yeah, reading with expression and fluency is a key of the reading framework. And I think it's the idea of trusting the process and knowing that by reading to your class in that way, you are through osmosis giving them that ability within their own reading as well. And we'll come on to that in a moment. Next slide, please. So reading across the curriculum. So obviously we've touched on our story time, we've touched on our reading lessons, we've touched on English, But this is the idea that really to create that strong reading culture within your school, reading needs to be happening absolutely everywhere. And I think this is really where Twinkl Originals can really support you if this is an area that currently is a little bit challenging for you in your setting. So reading aloud should not be limited to reading lessons, English lessons and story times. We should be weaving it through the whole curriculum. So as well as reading non-fiction books for our subjects like geography, science, history, we should be reading fiction books linked to those subjects as well. And narrative text can help children to immerse themselves in these different worlds and deepen their learning within these subjects. So within the Twinkl Originals library, which again, we'll share those links after the session, we've got so many novels that cover these themes. You've got stories about fossils, you've got stories about space, you've got stories about Romans and Vikings, you've got stories about ancient Maya. I could go on and on and on, but really one of our main goals is to make sure that that library is covering loads and loads and loads, as many as possible in terms of those topics that you are going to be covering within Key Stage 2. So do take a look at that, as it's a great place to start, and it will really help you to nail this part of the reading framework and get that into your, help you to really easily weave that into your learning. Thank you. So I'll just touch on this lightly because I think this is something that Tom covered really, really well. But it's great to see that within the reading framework, there is this focus and this acknowledgement on how reading has this incredible power to make our pupils empathetic and socially conscious readers. So we can use novels and picture books to explore tricky topics and challenge children's thinking. And when listening to those stories, children can see things from a different point of view that might differ to their own. And they develop that understanding of the people around them, helping them to build relationships and better communication ultimately. And again, Twinkl Originals are a really good starting point for this. So we do have a whole range of Key Stage 2 picture books, which specifically cover more challenging themes. So we've just got a little snip there of one of them. This is Enzo's Egg. So Enzo's Egg is a Key Stage 2 picture book, which really explores mental health challenges, how people might react to mental health challenges, how we can support each other, and what that might look like for different individuals. So obviously a huge subject that rightly so needs to be discussed within the classroom, but perhaps not all educators feel particularly comfortable bringing that up without a story to lean on. So I think really having stories that help us to explore these more challenging issues, it's such a great gateway in, and it's such a great way of again supporting our learners in becoming empathetic and socially conscious. So to finish on, we just wanted to summarise really with 5 tips, so 5 things that you can take away today with you and have a think about for your setting, because we've said lots and lots and lots there about all the great stuff that's in the new reading framework. And again, like Emma mentioned, we have got those 2 blogs that go into much more detail about everything that's been discussed today. So do check those out, share them with people that haven't been able to make the session. But the reading framework in itself is a really large document, and we appreciate that. So what we've tried to do there is to kind of summarize the main points for you as educators, because we totally understand that there isn't always that time. So our 5 tips from today, thinking about what you can take away and think about for your setting. Number 1, update your book library. So go and explore the Twinkl Originals range. If you're not yet a subscriber, download our free taste packs. They're going to be shared with you after the session as well. And again, thinking about physically within your library, that's getting hold of those picture books for your setting. It's getting hold of poetry books. It's getting hold of a whole wealth of different text types. It's including those books within there that have that diversity. And it's including those books as well that cover different subject areas too. So Originals can help with all of that. Go and take a look. Number 2, planning that daily story time. So yeah, Tom's evidence there for the impact of that speaks for itself. The reading framework very clearly says that needs to be planned into your timetable. So if you're not doing it already, do get that time planned in and safeguard it. Number 3, find books to read aloud that cover history, geography and science, and include those within your planning. Number 4, choose extracts from your class text to use in your English lessons. So I've popped that one in there because really with the reading framework mentioned several times that really when you're reading aloud to your class, you shouldn't be interrupting. You should be allowing them to immerse themselves within that story. And like Tom said, getting lost in a story is one of the best ways to learn when you're really, really loving what you're listening to. That is where the magic happens. So by not interrupting too much within your reading sessions and within your story time, you can then pick up an extract from the same text, and that is where you're delving into it in more detail within your English lesson. And last but not least, number 5, download the Twinkl Originals app and share it with parents and carers to promote that reading aloud at home. So Nick talked there about the importance of the reading environment and encouraging children to see lots of different adults, encouraging them to read, being enthusiastic readers themselves. So obviously that will differ from setting to setting, but speak again with SLT about how you can encourage that at home, and the Twinkl Originals app is a super easy way of achieving that. If they haven't got access to physical books at home, they can access a whole library through our app. And that's all from Emma and I. Thank you very much.